Hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm testing out a little bit of a new setup at the moment, so please do let me know in the comments down below if this looks kind of shit or if you think it looks good. Today's video is all about a new kind of thing that I want to try, which is trope-based recommendations. So my plan is for every month to basically run you through a list of my 10 favorite tropes and book recs that I have for that month for each of those tropes. Some months obviously I won't have a book rec for every trope because I won't have read one that I recommend in that sort of vein every month. But for this very first video, I have 10 tropes to run through that I love and 10 books to recommend that each fall into one of those tropes. As I am predominantly a romance and fantasy romance reader, they are all sort of romantic tropes, so if that's not your vibe, that's totally fine. Still stick around, you might find some things in here that you might enjoy. Let's crack straight into our first trope. Now, you can't make a video like this without talking about the trope that reigns supreme, and that is enemies to lovers, for which I recommend The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This is the first book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series, which I think is a series of duologies. This first book is an enemies to lovers romance, and it follows Araya, who is the daughter of the Nightborn King, and she is a human in a world of vampires. Her only chance to become something more and to prove herself is to enter a tournament that's run, I think, every 100 years, called the Kajari, and it is a Hunger Games style fight to the end, fight to the death. Now, because she's a human, she's naturally looking at alliances, who she can team up with and who she can potentially have help her along the way so that she survives, and that is when she stumbles across our MMC Rain, who is a vampire, and he is the sworn enemy of her father. He is not only her greatest competition, but she also finds herself strangely drawn to him as well. They strike up an alliance with the help of another character, I think, called Misha, who is just an absolute ball of sunshine, and I think the second duology follows her, so I'm really excited for that. And I guess they just try to survive this competition together, despite the fact that only one person can come out of this alive. So yeah, this is an enemies to lovers romance. Obviously the enemy stems from the fact that Rain is the enemy to her father's crown, so she's already feeling a little bit prejudiced and against him because she's raised in this world that's taught her to hate him and his kind. I think the push and pull in the romance is really fun as well, because obviously they're both very attracted to each other, but neither of them really wants to admit it because they are enemies. They have very conflicting beliefs and very conflicting opinions on the power system at play in this world. And then add to all of that the fact that she doesn't know if she can trust him, because at the end of the day, she's in a competition where only one person is going to come out of this alive, and she needs it to be her. It's kind of at the end of the day that one of them is going to have to kill the other at the end, so she doesn't really want to get too attached. Strongly recommend this if you are a fan of enemies to lovers, and also if you like a bit of Hunger Games. So that is our first trope. Let's go on to our second. I am a sucker for star-crossed lovers, for people who aren't meant to be together, for people who defeat the odds, and that is why I love a forbidden romance, and that is why I'm recommending A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair, which is a romance between Hades and Persephone. This is a Greek mythology retelling set in a more modern context, and their romance is most definitely forbidden. So this is the first book in the Hades and Persephone series by this author. It follows Persephone, who is just finally starting to make her way out from underneath her mother's thumb. She's enrolled at university, she's got a job at as a journalist at New Athens News, and she has this righteous belief that she is going to take down the gods and expose all of their corrupt ways. And she decides that the way she's gonna kind of start this is with Hades, because Hades has trapped her into a deal after she plays a game of cards with him one night at his club, Nevernight, and loses, which basically means that Persephone is forced to create life in the underworld. The only problem is Persephone, despite being the goddess of spring, manages to kill every single thing that she touches. She feels abandoned by her magic, she feels unable to complete this deal, and she feels like she is just going from one prison with her mother into a new prison with Hades, which is only further confused and conflicted by the growing feelings that she's starting to experience for this god and the intense attraction that they both seem to have for each other. The forbidden aspect definitely comes in a lot of ways. So it's forbidden because, one, her mother basically says to her, you are not allowed to have relations with any of the other gods. Another forbidden aspect is that Persephone has written this scathing article about Hades exposing all of his corrupt ways. So then if she was to pursue a relationship with him, it would absolutely destroy her reputation. It is definitely an incredibly immersive world, an incredibly entertaining story. It's definitely something that I would recommend if you like a uncomplicated kind of story. A lot of the relationship dynamics between these two characters are really easy to understand, and the world is also sort of a modern context, so there are a lot of things at play in this world that you will recognize. I don't think this book requires any understanding of Greek mythology going into it, because I have none and I'm doing fine. But I think there are little Easter eggs and appearances of some characters that are famous in Greek mythology that will pop up in this story, which maybe you'll enjoy it a little bit more if you kind of know the background of that story. But yeah, if you love a good forbidden romance, I would really recommend this one. So let us go on to trope number 3. In my opinion, there is nothing better for building out a romance than simply just having on-page interactions between the two main characters. And sometimes to make that happen authentically, you kind of have to force them into the same place at the same time. And that is why forced proximity is one of my favorite tropes. And the book that I have to recommend you for this is The Chase by L. Kennedy. This is the first book in the Briar U series by this author, which is a spin-off of the Off-Campus series. It is a hockey romance series, and honestly, anything by L. Kennedy in this kind of Briar University world will give you not only swoon-worthy romances, but incredible found family that will just have you wishing you could transport yourself into this world and just meet some of these people and be a part of their world. But as for this book, it follows Summer. I think her last name is De Laurentiis. So she's the younger sister of one of the characters in the Off-Campus series, and she is a bit of a whirlwind. She starts the book with her whole world kind of going up in flames. The sorority house that she wanted to pledge towards has rejected her. She's now homeless, only for her brother to kind of come to the rescue and say, well, I don't live in my old college house anymore because I've graduated, so I have a room available. Do you want to just move into my old room? This new living arrangement, however, does mean that she is now going to be living with 3 of her brother's ex-teammates, one of which she has had a serious crush on for a really long time, only for this guy to kind of perpetually reject and push her to the side. All of this kind of comes to a head one New Year's Eve when she gets some serious vibes that this guy is wanting to actually pursue things with her. His name's Colin Fitzgerald, only for him to reject her and kind of say something mean, so she goes and kisses one of his best friends and realizes that not only does Colin Fitzgerald like her, but kind of refuse to admit that he likes her, his best friend also does. So this also has kind of a love triangle aspect to it, as well as a bit of a slow burn between her and Colin as they kind of go back and forth between really liking each other, but also refusing to admit that they like each other. And of course, because it's Elle Kennedy, it's got some fun, spicy time in there. She is the queen in my mind. Yeah, there are a lot of tropes that go into this story, but in particular, the one that I think starts it all is forced proximity, and I absolutely loved it. It's also just got that classic sports romance, kind of macho man kind of vibe to it, which is just, you know, we all love a bit of that. So I would recommend this for the forced proximity trope. Let's go on to the next trope, which I think is number 4. With enemies to lovers being the absolute pinnacle in my mind of romance tropes, especially with fantasy romance, of course, we also have to touch on the kind of counteract to that, which is the classic friends to lovers trope, where they've known each other for years and only through the course of this story do they realize that they either both have feelings for each other or that they've both been hiding feelings for each other. With this trope, I'm going to recommend the book Catch the Sun by Jennifer Hartman. Now, before I tell you what this is about, I will say, please search up your trigger warnings before you pick up this book. It is a heavy book. A lot of Jennifer Hartman's books are incredibly heavy books. So please look up your trigger warnings. It's needed. Trust me, I got to the end of this book and kind of felt like I had gone on an emotional roller coaster. It was crazy. This book follows Ella Sunbury and Max Hastings, who knew each other when they were children. I think they were about 7 years old when Ella lived with her father for about a year, and they became fast and best friends. Then Ella picked up and moved unexpectedly. Max never knew where she went until one day she reappears in his life completely changed. Gone is that sunshiny lover of life with this incredibly bubbly personality, replaced instead by a sort of sullen and given up on life Ella. Ella has moved back to town and is now living in the cloud of her felon brother's reputation. He has been convicted of the murder of his ex-girlfriend and his ex-girlfriend's lover, and as a result, Ella is content to fade into the background because she doesn't want to deal with the harassment and the bullying that comes along with being related to this murderer. But Max, despite having little room in his life for distractions because he's got his own set of horrible things going on, including an alcoholic father and a brother who is just completely checked out, he is kind of determined to understand Ella a bit more and to figure out what happened to the girl who he knew when he was 7 years old. He wants to turn their budding friendship, which she seems intent on pushing to the side, into more. But as their relationship blossoms, new tragedy after new tragedy after new tragedy strike, testing their bond to the absolute limits, like seriously absolute limits, and they really just, as two teenagers in high school, struggle to figure out how they're going to survive in each other's worlds. It is a hefty book, so there is a lot in here. Like, I cannot overemphasize how much is packed into this story. It is emotional as hell. But I think what I loved about this book, aside from the clear friends to lovers and the sort of slow pacing of the romance and how they really had to bond as friends before they turned into anything more, is the fact that this story not only delivered an emotional punch, but some serious tension between these two characters and a lot of situations that happened in their own separate lives that forced these two characters to really step away and reevaluate what they wanted for their own life rather than just kind of what they saw themselves potentially wanting if they were to prioritize the relationship that was building between them. I am not going to pretend or preach or try and convince you that all the topics that are covered in this book are necessarily well handled, but I think that they are interesting. I think they are delved into to a certain extent, and I think they pack an emotional punch. So I would recommend this as a friends to lovers romance, but I would seriously recommend that you check the trigger warnings because it is a hefty emotional romance, which I think I've said about 60 times, but I cannot overemphasize how much you really, really need to just like be wary of what happens in this story because Jennifer Hartman does not hold back and she chucks a lot in here. But it's got a nice ending. It was kind of cute. So yeah, let's move on to the next trope, which is trope number 5. You get a high five because I'm filming. Jesus. This is another trope where in contemporary romance, it reigns supreme. Everybody loves a little bit of some grumpy sunshine, especially when the guy is the grump, though I'm seeing a real resurgence or surgence, I don't know, what's the word there? Like, a real drive, I guess, for people wanting a black cat heroine. But anyway, the book that I have to recommend for this is for lovers of It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey, and that is The Little Things. This is the first book in the second Hope series by Jessica Prince, and it is essentially, in addition to being for lovers of It Happened One Summer, I would also say if you love a good cowboy romance, if you love a good ranch romance, if you love a good kind of moody hero, then this is where it's at for you. I really, really recommend it. So just for a bit of context, Second Hope is, I think, a spin-off series of another series by this author. I haven't read the first series, so that just tells you that you can 100% read this, but obviously it will spoil some of the relationships in that first series. But it follows Zach and Ray. And Ray, very much like the girl in It Happened One Summer, whose name is escaping me, is a bit of a party girl. She lives in a world where everything she could possibly want is given to her until one day she kind of accidentally sets a fire and her parents say enough is enough. This is gone too far. So they send Ray back to the small town where they fell in love and onto Second Hope Ranch. They are of the belief that a little bit of hard work and elbow grease is all this girl needs to get her head back on straight and her mind back into reality. She's forced to become a ranch hand on this ranch, and there she meets Zach, who I believe owns the ranch, or at at least manages the ranch. Very much like the hero from It Happened One Summer, he seriously does not expect much from Ray. He expects her to be a party girl, he expects her to be lazy, he expects her to complain, and she is determined to prove him wrong. And so she does. And a fabulous Grumpy Sunshine romance is created between the two of them as she works harder than she's ever worked and proves to him that she is gonna put in the hard yards. She is actually going into this really open, I think, to the idea of changing. She understands that things have gone too far and she's done something wrong and she needs to reel it back in, which I really, really liked about this story. She's not like pretending to be this perfect girl. And over time, I guess Zach begins to realize that there is more to her than the kind of party girl lifestyle and the reputation that kind of trails in her wake. There's also this really, really adorable, sweet kind of animal bonding moment that happens where basically there's this one horse on the ranch that they're trying to train, and it's really, really spirited and nobody's able to like even ride the horse without it bucking them off, except Ray feels this really intense connection with the horse. It's kind of that classic, like, she's really, really spirited and wild, so is the horse, and they find connection in each other. It is an amazing small town cowboy romance, serious found family vibes, serious Grumpy Sunshine trope, and it is just adorable. And you know, it's got that animal companion aspect as well, which we all know and love. If you liked It Happen One Summer, then you should definitely pick this up. Let's move on to our next trope, which I think is number 6, 7. I am a sucker for where a relationship goes wrong and then all of a sudden the two come back together and are forced to make things right again. I think there is nothing better than the tension of two people who know each other romantically, something went wrong, and then they come back together and they rebuild from where everything went wrong the first time. And the book that I have to recommend for this, because I think it is just the pinnacle of a second chance romance, is King of Greed by Anna Huang, which I have a physical copy for that I can't find. But basically this book is the, I think, third or fourth book in the Kings of Sin series by this author. I haven't had much success with the earlier books and I'm a little bit hesitant about jumping into King of Sloth just because Anna Huang and me, like, I loved a few of the Twisted books, for like Twisted Love, Twisted Games, and Twisted Hate. I hated Twisted Lies, but anything else I've read by this author just hasn't really hit until I got to King of Greed. This book follows, I think his name's Dominic and Alessandra, and Alessandra is the wife of Dominic, and she feels so incredibly neglected by him. He is a hotshot, powerful man who is so determined and set on his career. They met, I think, originally when they were both like struggling financially, and so he really prioritized his career and giving her everything, and he did it with the best of intentions, but it kind of sort of turned into this really toxic environment where he's prioritizing that so much that his wife feels neglected. And so his wife, Alessandra, says enough is enough. And so she checks out, giving this guy a serious wake-up call and resulting in a romance that feels like 300 pages of third act conflict. So this book is not for people who are on the sort of I hate third act conflict train. I love the fact that they are so tension filled and angst filled and that they can be incredibly toxic sometimes. Sometimes they do make you hate one of the characters in the romance, but for me, I love it. I love the drama. So if you are like me, if you love the drama of a third act conflict, you will love this book because it is an entire book where the guy, Dominic, is basically pining and groveling for Alessandra to give him another chance as she goes and does her independent woman thing, starts her own little small business that I think ends up doing really, really well, proving that she doesn't need him and finally accepting him back into her life because, let's be honest, it's a romance, they're gonna get back together in the end. So not only does this have the sort of second chance romance aspect to it, but it's obviously also got the billionaire romance aspect to it, and it's got some great spice and some great smut, which we can all agree that Anna Huang really, really executes amazingly well on. So yeah, if you want a book that feels almost entirely like a third act conflict stretched over 300 pages with like supreme groveling, this is the book for you. Please read it. Please give it a chance because I've heard so many people not like the first two books and then love this one. But anyway, let's move on to trope number 7. Now this is one of those tropes where for me it is only good, it is only enjoyable if it is done right. And the only right way to do a love triangle trope is for the reader to genuinely have no idea which character the main character is going to end up with. And that is exactly what happened in Light Luck by Alex Aster. This is an incredible book. It deserves the hype in my opinion. I picked up this one, immediately picked up the second one. This series, or book in particular, I guess, is set in a world where the rulers of these 6 different kingdoms are forced to compete every 100 years in something called the Centennial. And the purpose of the Centennial is to break the curse that has been placed on each of these rulers. And so we follow Isla, who is a wildling. She has like plant and rock, sort of like earth magic, basically. She's from a kingdom that basically knows nothing about her because she's been protected all of her life. And she has a massive, massive secret that she's trying to keep from the other rulers in this set of games. So she arrives at the Centennial and there she meets 2 men, Grim and Oro. Grim is the sort of shadow daddy kind of love interest, and then Oro is more of the golden sun king kind of love interest. And so for me, naturally, when I jumped into this book, I was thinking, well, of course, like the shadow daddy's gonna win because it's fantasy romance in this day and age. It's always the shadow daddy. But this book actually kind of reformed blonde-haired heroes for me, which I know that's like unbelievable, but it's true, because Oro has this kind of like reluctant, which makes him even more enticing kind of approach to the romance where they're building feelings for each other based on this alliance that they've kind of created between the two of them. There's a lot more, I think, on-page romantic development between those 2 characters, and it made me kind of root for him more. But anyway, the love triangle is between Isla, Oro, and Grim. Grim seems to have some sort of past relationship with Isla or some sort of knowledge of Isla that she just doesn't understand. And at various points in the story, she kind of allies with both of them. There's a lot of betrayal, there's a lot of intrigue, secrets, mystery, the whole curse breaking plotline of, you know, one of the rulers has to die in order to break the curse, but if that ruler dies, their entire kingdom dies with them, so the stakes are incredibly high. Isla believes that she is the least powerful of all of the rulers, so she thinks that makes her an easy target. And it's just an incredibly immersive world. It's this young, innocent girl who is completely out of her depth, and the 2 men that she kind of falls in love with over the course of the story, and then is like betrayed by them over and over and over again. It is just incredible. So if you love a good love triangle, pick this up. But let's move on to our next trope, which I think is number 8. So we are almost at the end. This trope is sort of one of those guilty pleasure tropes for me. It's one of those ones where if I just want a romance where I don't have to think too hard about romantic development, I just kind of trust that they love each other and just want to dive straight into like the drama, this is a good place to go for that. And so Fated Mates is probably one of my best like guilty pleasure, don't want to think too hard, easy read kind of tropes. And so the book that I have picked to recommend to you definitely falls within all of those categories, and that is Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. I know, don't come for me, don't judge me, please. This is such a guilty pleasure series for me. It is so good, it's a smutty good time, it doesn't require a lot of brain power. Ice Planet Barbarians is the recommendation, and basically this particular first book follows a group of women who are kidnapped by aliens in like the middle of the night. And we follow Georgie, who wakes up on this alien ship and is put through like serious trauma by these orange like basketball headed aliens, only to then have the ship crash land on this ice planet, forcing these women into this life or death scenario where one of them just has to take the lead, venture out into the snow and try and find salvation. So Georgie decides to do this. She's volunteered, I guess, to be the leader of the group, and as she ventures out into the snow, she stumbles across Vectel. Now, the way they kind of meet each other for the first time is definitely something where I suggest you check out your trigger warnings before you read this book. I personally thought it was great and loved it and thought it was really fun, but some people may not be so keen on that particular trope or that particular scenario, I guess. She stumbles across Vectel, and Vectel is basically a really tall, blue alien, like 7 foot tall kind of thing, with like a tail, and I think he's got horns as well. Like he's like, this is monster smut for you guys. Like, so seriously, if that's your thing, read this. If that's not, just please skip to the next rec, because this is gonna get progressively weirder. And basically these aliens have mates, and they live in a world where basically all of the women of this world kind of died off a really long time ago, so they are desperate for women because they are a dying race and they need to procreate. And so Vectel naturally is incredibly pleased when what is called his Kui, or like this being that lives inside of him, vibrates basically, this is getting so weird, for Georgie, which is a sign that Georgie is his mate. So he kind of kidnaps her, then they fall in love. And it's great fun. It's so good. And like through the rest of the series, you kind of watch the other girls that were kidnapped on the ship by the orange aliens, then find their mates and fall in love. There's all sorts of like friends to lovers. There's more of like an enemies to lovers in here. There are so many different types of romances. So there is something for everyone. And it's monster smut. It's just like really fun monster smut. So check it out if you love Fated Mates. Because it's great. It's really great, and it's such an addictive read, and they're quick, easy books, and I would recommend the novellas because they're just like fun, spicy reads. But anyway, let's move on to the next trope, which I think is trope number 9. This is definitely one of those ones which is another sort of booktube, book talk darling. Everybody loves a bit of fake dating. Everybody loves essentially just watching two people try and pretend they don't have feelings for each other as they're forced into more and more romantic situations with each other, which if you think about it, sounds strange, and 100% is strange. In fact, if you think about any of these romance tropes, they are all so strange. But anyway, the book that I have to recommend for this particular trope, I think, is the absolute king of fake dating, and also has a bit of friends to lovers in there as well, just for fun times. It is, of course, Love Like Farms by B.K. Borison. This is a very recent read for me. It is obviously the festive season right now, and so I picked this up. I didn't expect to love it because I don't like holiday romances as just a rule, but this was perfect because it was holiday in the sense that you could tell it was Christmas, and it had that kind of fun, festive nature to it, but it wasn't cheesy, it wasn't corny, it wasn't cliche, it wasn't all those sorts of things that holiday romances can be, where they become really samey and predictable. This basically follows Stella, and she owns a Christmas tree farm, and she is struggling to pay the bills. She is working with her friends on this Christmas tree farm. She is hiding from them the fact that she is really struggling to make ends meet, and so she signs up to a social media competition where she basically lies on her entry form to say that she runs this Christmas tree farm with her boyfriend. Now, the social media competition will basically mean a lot of press coverage for her, and hopefully it will result in just a renewed life for this business that she's running. Obviously though, the problem is she said that she owns this farm with her boyfriend, but she don't have a boyfriend. So she starts kind of making her way around the farm going, who can I possibly rope into pretending to be my boyfriend? She asks this one guy called Beckett, and he's like, whoa, no. And then she turns to this guy that she's always kind of had a crush on, and that is her best friend, Luke. Little does she know though, he 100% has feelings too, that he's kind of been hiding from her. They've been hiding it from each other, or at least I don't think he's been hiding it that much. She just is like really dumb and hasn't realized it, and he agrees. So Stella and Luca team up to take part in the social media competition, to fake date, to do progressively more romantic things together with a lot of festive, cute, small town vibes. Like if you want the small town where you feel like you walk into the town hall and everybody's like gossiping and bickering and everybody knows everybody's business, like this is perfect for that. It also hints very, very well about the romance that's going to be in the second book, and I cannot wait to read that. This is just the peak pinnacle, I think, of a fake dating romance because it's just so sweet, and you as the reader know that these two people have serious feelings for each other, so watching them kind of skirt around the truth is just really entertaining because you can see it, but they for some reason can't. Serious recommendation here for trope number 9, which is fake dating. But now let's go into our final trope, trope number 10. If you couldn't already tell, I am a little bit of a sucker for kind of semi-toxic situations resulting in really swoony romances. And that is why the single parent slash surprise pregnancy trope is one of my favorites. I think surprise pregnancy is one of those tropes where everybody hates it, but I love it. I am in the minority and I am glad to be there because the tension and the angst and the drama of a surprise pregnancy is just everything. So the final trope of my favorite tropes, my 10 favorite tropes, is the single parent slash surprise pregnancy trope. It's anything really involving kids. And the book recommendation that I have for it falls more in the kind of single parent vein of things, and that is Next of Kin by Hannah Bonham Young. This is the first book that I ever read by this author, and I adored it. Like, I cannot describe to you how amazing this book was of a read for me, because it was kind of emotional. It wasn't toxic in the way that surprise pregnancy can be. It was just really heartfelt and sweet and adorable. But anyway, we follow Chloe, who finds out that her birth mother, who's kind of checked out of her life, has just given birth to a baby. And Chloe is freaking out because her birth mother can't look after this child, so she's like, well, I will, because this is my sister. I'm gonna take this baby on. The only problem is Child Services, whatever it's called, doesn't accept her application to become this child's legal guardian, because while she has an amazing place that's perfect for the care of an infant, she doesn't have the money. So this person makes her aware of a new system, and I think it's called like Team Up or something, where basically they get two people who are absolute strangers who are in similar situations trying to become the legal guardian for someone in their life, but are each missing an integral part, and they get them to live together so that they can each give the other person what they're missing. Chloe has the place but doesn't have the money, and Warren has the money but doesn't have the place. Warren is desperate to be the legal guardian for, I think, his 15 or so year old deaf brother. So these two people team up, and Warren and his deaf little brother move in with Chloe and her infant little sister. Naturally, Chloe is incredibly, almost immediately overwhelmed by what the care of an infant requires, as well as the fact that she's got two new strangers living in her house, one of whom is a surly mechanic who's grumpy, seems to really not want to be there or have anything to do with Chloe, and also kind of refuses to help despite the fact that she is clearly bedraggled, tearing out her hair, and just overwhelmed by the care of this baby that she desperately loves. From the moment that these two meet, Chloe is convinced this is a bad idea. This is a cautionary tale waiting to happen. But she starts to really bond with Warren's younger brother, and over time starts to bond with Warren as they break down each other's walls. I think Warren in this particular scenario, if you don't love a really surly, kind of mean, doesn't want to be there, can also be rude and hero, then you probably won't like this book, because he is definitely all of those things. And I will say that if there was one character that I didn't 100% love in this story, it was Warren, but their romance is sweet. The sort of found family vibes of the story are adorable. The children are so cute. And the chemistry and the mutual attraction between Warren and Chloe as they just struggle to kind of make their lives work together is just absolutely palpable. It's incredible. If you love a little bit of surprise pregnancy or a little bit of single parent or something in that line, and you want a kind of emotional romance that really does talk through like child services and the whole foster care system and the legal guardian adoption process, and I think what is a lot of honesty, and I learned a lot about it, then I would really recommend reading this book because it's a good fun time. So yeah, that is trope number 10, book recommendation number 10. So we are officially at the end. This is probably quite a long video, so I hope you enjoyed my 10 favorite tropes and the books that I would recommend for each of them. As I said, I want to do this as kind of like a monthly check-in kind of thing. Rather than a monthly wrap-up, I just run you through my favorite books of that month and kind of which tropes they fall into. Some months I will have one book for each trope, but then I think most months I'll have like a few books for just like a couple of the tropes. But anyway, let me know in the comments down below what your favorite romance trope is. For me, out of this list, it probably has to be something like Fated Mates or Surprise Pregnancy, because I just think they're such like guilty pleasure, easy reads. But let me know what it is for you in the comments down below, or just let me know what you're reading at the moment, loving it, hating it, all that kind of thing. Come and chat to me in the comments down below. I truly love talking to you guys. As always, if you like this video, please do like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I release new videos. And do go and check out my TikTok as well, link down below. That's where I kind of do more vlog-ish style content, in the sense it's like immediate reactions of books as I'm reading them. And I do some funny videos, or at least I think they're funny as well on there. So do go and check that out. That is it for me today. So I hope you're having an incredible day, and I will hopefully see you in my next video. Bye.